Hi everyone, it's William. This is take 2 of my addendum to the part 9 of the 15th March 1921 Grand Duke Dmitri diary entry, focusing on Nikolai Yevgenyevich Markov, who's the person that Dmitri has just described to us in his diaries as having met. And so take 2, because I ended up talking for 25 minutes and it was disorganized. So I'm going to try it again and try to be a little more organized, although that's not really my strong point. So just to reiterate what Dmitri said about Markov too, he said that the man had made a positive impression on him. He said that he was surprised by his ideas because he'd expected someone who was very rigid and narrow-minded and doctrinaire, and maybe even a little bit scary, given the guy's reputation. And he expected him to be more royalist than the king, and to be the kind of person who grabs what he wants and doesn't let it go, and to have this ultraviolet color, which I'm not sure exactly what Dmitri means by that. But anyway, you've hopefully already watched my comment on that anyway. So Markov, the things that would have appealed to Dmitri about him were that he was a man of action and had a considerable presence, a very charismatic man and a man of action, and that he was a good organizer. And Dmitri says, as you know, that his impression is that Markov learned his lesson from the revolution and from the aftermath of the revolution, and now is more liberal. Not liberal, but more liberal. So, let's see where this goes, is kind of what Dmitri is saying. And yeah, he likes how the members of Markov's group have a strong sense of discipline and organization, and, in his opinion, that's how you get things done. And that's what he's frustrated by the lack of in Paris, about that kind of focus and discipline and action as opposed to just discussion. So those are the things he likes about him. This man is a nightmare, which happily Dmitri will figure out. Okay, he's about 56 years old at this time in March 1921 when Dmitri meets him. And he will be the person, he's the organizer, or one of the organizers of this Reichenhall monarchist conference that will soon be taking place in May 1921, that Dmitri will not attend because he'll be off with Coco, whom he's more or less eloped with, even though they don't get married. And at this Reichenhall conference, he will be elected as the chairman of the Supreme Monarchist Council. Sounds very grand. And we have this description given by, so in the book by Alexander Zhivakov, he quotes a man whom he identifies as a Russian philosopher, a sort of centrist, politically Russian philosopher, or at least he says by no means a leftist. The name of the man is Ilyin, which is, related to Ilyinsky, although there's no relations to, Dmitri's descendants, the Ilinskys, and this man, from the name Ilya, which means is the Russian form of Elijah. So this philosopher provides us with quite a charming description of Nikolai Yevgenyevich Markov. He says, this Markov has something of Peter the Great in his physicality. He is strong-willed with a forceful temperament. He's intelligent and brutally cunning. His intrigues are crude. He is very proud and not very cultured, obsessed with anti-Semitism and hatred of Freemasons. He understands nothing about economics and doesn't have a single original idea. He is neither a leader nor a builder, just a demagogue with a black glint in his eye. I love that last part, but you can see why someone meeting him for the first time and thinking, oh, this guy has lost his extremism, would be impressed by this huge guy who's so determined and such a force of nature almost, so to speak. Okay. So I want to talk just a little bit about what Markov II was before the revolution, because he was already trying to organize political groups. And it's quite interesting that these, for people like Markov II, who wanted autocracy in its purest form, and certainly without a state Duma, a legislative body or an elected body, he nonetheless took advantage of the opportunity that arose in 1905 when Nicholas II issued, under duress, issued the October Manifesto, which allowed for an elected Duma. And yeah, he took advantage of it. He started a political party. The political party was called the Union of the Russian People, and he got a seat in the Duma on the far right. And, I guess that was his first success as a political organizer, but it's not one that he could have been proud of looking back. I'm sure he was, but because it was associated with a terrorist group, just like the socialist revolutionaries had their terrorist group called the Battle Organization that had assassinated Dmitri's uncle Sergei. So too, the Union of Russian People had a terrorist organization called the Black Hundreds. And the Black Hundreds were responsible for all kinds of pogroms and assassinations. And we're told by Zhivakov, I quote, that they used extreme violence against all adversaries, and that was very true. But they were a terrorist group that had a little bit of support, unfortunately, from the government and from Nicholas and Alexandra. And so, going now to the Lacour book, okay, where are we? They had open support given to them by the government, which was a source for them of both strength and weakness. The emperor thanked them for their most loyal activities, and the Tsaritsa also gave them open support. It is estimated that in 1 year alone, the government paid the Union 2.5 million rubles for its activities. Markov, too, admitted in his interrogation that he had accepted considerable sums for the Union press. The Union had the right to ask for a free pardon for any of its members arrested for participation in pogroms or similar crimes. So that's quite convenient for a terrorist group to have a get-out-of-jail-free card. Okay, going on, the Union had never been a group of high-minded idealists. An analysis of its social composition shows that its members were drawn largely from the flotsam and jetsam of the big cities. Its leaders were a curious mixture of the aristocracy, the clergy, merchants, and the more backward elements of the petite bourgeoisie. You did not have to be a leftist to understand that the Black Hundreds and the Union of Russian People were absolutely bad news. You could be a staunch monarchist and recognize this group for what it was, as an extremist group of the most sinister kind, a violent extremist group. But people can be incredibly naive, and Nicholas made the mistake that all too often is made by leaders of governments, by thinking, well, I can have it both ways. I can accept what this group has to offer as staunch defenders of autocracy, and at the same time, I can have enough distance from them, and I can make sure that they don't get out of control. Wrong. We're sort of in the midst of that right now in the United States. I don't want to go political on you, but there are a lot of people who one had always thought were people that had values and who, were intelligent, upstanding, decent people. And it turns out the first time some strong man comes along, their values go out the window. They don't have any values. They never really had any values. And thank God that wasn't the case with Dmitri. But anyway, here we go. I'm always putting my foot in my mouth. But What the heck? Okay, so the person that Dmitri did know, he didn't know Markov, but he knew Purishkevich, who was another Duma member who was on the far right and who had connections with the Union of Russian People, was a member of it, and had connections with the Black Hundreds. And Purishkevich, as I said in a previous video, was one of two Duma members that Felix Yusupov and Dmitri approached for support in the Rasputin assassination. One of them was a cadet, a constitutional Democrat. And in fact, the Constitutional Democrats were another political party that came into existence in 1905, when suddenly it was possible for people to organize political parties and have elections and have campaigns. So they went to a cadet, Markov, and they went to a right-winger, Purishkevich. And Markov gave them moral support and nothing else. Purishkevich actually was involved in the assassination and claims that he was one of those who, he and Felix Yusupov both shot Rasputin and then beat him to death. Pleasant stuff. And anyway, Purishkevich would split and form his own group called the Union of the Archangel Michael. He was an extremist, but he wasn't quite as extreme as Markov too. And so that was what Markov was up to before the revolution. He was, in fact, in 1910, he was expelled from the Duma for 4 months because of his anti-Semitic ranting. And he predicted that in Russia in the future there would be no need to deal with the Jewish question because all the Jews would be killed in pogroms. So you see what kind of monstrous individual this was. Okay, so next, after getting out of Russia, he was for a while in Finland and in Estonia before he settled in Berlin. And while he was still in Finland, he founded another one of these political groups. And this one was a secret organization. So not really, political, but not really political. A secret organization called the Union of the Faithful. And he had in that the involvement of a member of the Romanov family, Peter, the Duke of Oldenburg, who was a Romanov on his mother's side and who had grown up in Russia and was, much more connected to the Romanov dynasty than he was to the Dukes of Oldenburg, although he was a Duke of Oldenburg. So he was a member of this Union of the Faithful. And I don't know much about him, except that he'd been married for a while to the Tsar's youngest sister, Grand Duchess Olga, and they'd gotten a divorce. So anyway, one of the things that Markov considered desirable was that there should be a military alliance between his group, his right-wing group, and Germany and Japan and Turkey. So basically the Axis to be, although Italy isn't mentioned. And that, of course, was something that Dmitri was horrified by when he knew about it. He was horrified by the right-wing, the willingness of the right-wing to want to involve foreign powers in Russia. Okay, anyway, moving forward, that's what he was doing. And then he went to and settled in Berlin. And and that was when Dmitri met him. And he was organizing this this Reichenhall conference, which would have elections for the, the Supreme Monarchist Council, which he would be the president of. What would he do after that? Well, in 1927, he would leave the Supreme Monarchist Council. I'm not sure if it fell apart or if he just parted ways with it. And he would become an overt Nazi collaborator, and he would remain so until the end. In Nazi Germany, he edited an anti-Semitic periodical and was occasionally consulted by the Gestapo on Russian questions, although he was not an important person. I think they just kind of saw him as a sort of crackpot. Here's what Lacour has to say about Markov in Berlin. There was a whole host of minor thinkers and writers in Berlin, Munich, and Belgrade who propagated similar views to each other with varying aptitude, intensity, and consistency. They had their own organizations, newspapers, periodicals, and publishing houses. Best known among them was undoubtedly Nikolai Yevgenyevich Markov, whose very name had been a byword in the last years of the Tsarist Empire. Born in 1866, a landowner from the Kursk district, he represented the extreme right in the second and in subsequent Dumas, heaping outrageous abuse on socialist liberals and, above all, right-of-center deputies. The Russian equivalent of a Junker, his attacks on capitalism were even more violent and noisy than his charges against the socialists. He was the main exponent of a pro-German political orientation, and throughout the war demanded a separate peace treaty with Germany. So in that respect, he was very much at odds with Nicholas and Alexandra, who did not desire a separate peace with Germany. After the revolution, Markov continued his activities in Germany. He headed the Russian Monarchist Union and helped to edit the Druglavi Oryol, the double-headed eagle, one of the leading periodicals at the time. However, as a writer and ideologist, Markov did not prove very effective. His main work, published in Russian in Paris and in a German edition in the Third Reich, is a collection of alarming reports about Illuminati meetings, ritual slaughter, Masonic plots, etc., from the death of Christ to the murder of Nicholas II. The only, blah, blah, blah. He spent his remaining years lecturing on the Russian immigration, an anticlimactic, though perhaps fitting end to a politician who fancied himself a potential Russian Bismarck, if not a new Peter I. I can't remember if I said in the previous video that there seemed to be all of these would-be dictators in the aftermath of the revolution, and Markov was one of those, definitely. And what he wanted was, he wanted a puppet czar. He wanted to be in charge. He wanted to be the dictator. And he wanted some autocrat, supposedly emperor, who was under his thumb, clearly. So we'll find out what he and Biskupski thought about Dmitri. In the next video, I'm going to talk about that. We have an eyewitness account of what was going on, aside from Dmitri's own, of what was going on during this period in Berlin, 1921, during Dmitri's visit. So that is excellent. I'm so happy to have come across that. Yes, anything else to say? Well, Dmitri, Dmitri is going to soon be joining the Young Russia Party, and he is not going to have any more to do with these extreme right-wingers, except in connection to Kirill. He had this very complicated relationship with Kirill once he gave up being the Tsar in exile himself. But Dmitri's convictions were the ones that he shared with another would-be dictator, Alexander Kazanbek, and they were not the convictions of the extreme right. And there's a bit of overlap there with Kirill, who also supported the Young Russia Party, but Dmitri was not on board with the right-wing stuff, so it's complicated. And in fact, interestingly, Dmitri's son told me, and he was very adamant about this, that Dmitri he used the word hated Kirill, and just loathed him. But Dmitri also agreed to support Kirill's claim to being the emperor in exile. And Dmitri also was not at all fond of the son, Vladimir, who at one point he uses an obscenity to describe in his diaries from the 1930s. And he was no lover of Kirill's wife either, Grand Duchess Victoria, known as Ducky within the family, who once told Dmitri to his face that he should be shot as a traitor. So there was not a great deal of love lost there between the two of them. But I'm getting way ahead of things, and I'm almost up to the 25-minute mark, although I was a little more organized this time. And I could yammer on about this forever, but I will see you next time when Dmitri tells us about the second person he met with, the equally, or maybe not quite, but pretty sinister Biskupski. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.